Welcome to the third part of our Bartholomew County cemetery tours. As you can see, we are not able to be in the cemetery today because of weather. So we will be using Find a Grave images of all the monuments for the people that we'll be talking about. And we hope that we'll be able to get out to the cemetery once the snow melts and get some footage there, and to make a map so that you can recreate this tour on your own. For February, we will be focusing on Black history in Bartholomew County because it is Black History Month, but this is not by any means the only time we will be talking about Black history in Bartholomew County because Black history is Bartholomew County history. For our tour, joining us today, we have a special guest, Paulette and Annette are both going to be telling us about some interesting local history stories.
I'm here with Paulette, as Kate mentioned. I'm Annette. And we want to share with you some stories of some citizens from Bartholomew County that we just find interesting and worthwhile to talk about. One of those being Granville Lee. Granville Lee was the first Black student to graduate from Columbus High School in 1901. His father was in the carpet business here, and their family home was at 614 Union Street. He, at some point, though, bought some property out in Wayne Township because he started to drill for oil and for gas out in that area, which was amazing to me because I grew up in that area and I had no idea about any of it. I mean, all this happened before I was born, so but I had not heard of this before. So I thought that was really interesting. And he did find some oil in that area, but it was never enough to actually get the drilling going in a major way where it made him lots of money or anything like that. His sister later talked about him finding gas out in that area, and he was able to have enough gas to be able to heat his home with it and to cook with it and to light his home. So he was able to get enough natural gas that he was able to do that. But he started out as a mechanic, and he worked on all kinds of different things. But in one place I read that he actually worked in a garage with Clessy Cummins. I found too that there was a road in Wayne Township named after him. They called it Granville Lee Road, and I thought, I don't remember that either when I was a kid, so I had to figure out where this road was. And from everything I was able to discover, Granville Lee Road was the road that ran right in front of Wayne Township School. And now there's a park there for people who don't know. The school was tore down, but so anyway, that road, I think it was 550 South. I wrote it down somewhere, but yes, 550 South in Wayne Township in the 50s probably was known as Granville Lee Road. But it was basically, I think, the 20s and maybe 30s into the 40s where he was trying to find gas and oil there. According to his cousin, who was Wayne Hanley, that we're going to talk about in a little bit, he was also, he could play the piano, which I guess, from what I understand, he didn't necessarily want everybody to know that part, or didn't, it wasn't as important to him as the other things he liked to do, but he was able to play the piano. His sister, in an interview later, had said of him, she said, he was very handsome. All the girls would invite him to their parties, and he would be the center of attention. So, He never married, and his sister Mabel, she never married either, so their family line basically ended with them. Now they had cousins and things like that carried on their family line, but with their family, they had a sister, I guess, that died when she was a baby. But the two of them, Mabel and Granville, were the only two in the family that grew to adulthood, but they never married. Now Mabel, she was born November 5th of 1886, and she died here in Columbus in April 8th, 1977. So we said she was Granville's sister, and she also said about him that he was very outstanding. She said they were very venturesome if there was something new they wanted to know about. So sounds like they liked to be on the cutting edge of things, and they were very inquisitive and curious. It sounds like they like to get in there and do things. She became a chiropractor here in Columbus. In the 1940s, she was very popular, I guess, as a chiropractor, from what I understand. And she graduated from Columbus High School in 1905. She owned a 120-acre farm in Wayne Township. Now, I wasn't clear if that was the same property. It was? Okay. I thought this was kind of interesting, too. The Columbus Convalescent home, which is on Midway, it was established in the 1960s, and she became one of the first residents there. And then, so she must have lived there for about 10 years before her passing. She was a member of First Christian Church, and I was telling Paulette, I found this little story in the newspaper. It would have been sometime after she graduated from high school, because she would have graduated in 1905, and this was 1908 when this was recorded in the newspaper. But there's a story in the newspaper about Mabel having a rooster. It says, "Here's a story that sounds like a nature fake, but it is told for a Simon Pure article of the truth. And if you do not believe it, you can go investigate." Of course, we can't do that now, but we're way beyond that. George Lee, who lives on Union Street, has a daughter, Mabel, and Miss Mabel owns a rooster. Now, the rooster is the accepted emblem of the Democratic Party, and this statement no one will deny. The other morning, Miss Mabel heard the rooster making a funny noise, which was accompanied by much flapping of wings, so she decided to investigate. Imagine her surprise when the rooster crowed and said as plainly as a parrot, "Hooray for Taft!" Miss Lee called her father, and when he appeared, the rooster again made the noise, which sounded so much like "Hooray for Taft" that an investigation was made to see if a stray parrot was not hiding somewhere in the yard. But it proved to be the rooster, and every morning the cock crows for Taft, says it plainly and with much gusto. This is taken as about the illest omen hatched up against the Democratic Party so far in the present campaign. And I thought that was such a cute story, because Taft did become president I think I looked it up, it was 1909 to 1913. So this would have been, and this article is from 1908, so it would have been, probably during the campaign time. And Taft was a Republican, so I just thought it was a really cute story. But those are the stories of Mabel and Granville Lee, and I know probably not near enough can be said. I don't know if you had anything about them that I didn't have.
Maybe one little thing.
Okay.
When she moved into the nursing home out on Midway, interest from the farm, which was the account was at Urban Union Bank. Yes. They served at as a trustee of the farm, and they used the monies to pay for her stay at the nursing home. I'd just like to share with you some points about Wayne Hanley and Benjamin King. Wayne Hanley came from Hodgenville, Kentucky. He owned shoe shine shops and pool halls as businesses here in Columbus. One of his daughters is Ann King, who still lives in Columbus, and he also had 2 sons. He's a cousin to Granville and Mabel. He had 2 other brothers, Sherman and Daniel, and 1 sister, Susie. Wayne, he bred dogs and sold them. His first wife was Elizabeth, and his second wife was Avenel Frazier, and she went to Second Baptist, and I knew her quite well. Very lovely woman. Rumor has it that they are related to Abraham Lincoln. They lived next door to the Lincoln farm, so it's possible that someone in the Lincoln family hooked up with one of the slaves. And this information was shared to me by Valerie, who is Ann's daughter, who would have been that would have been her grandfather. That's all I have about Wayne Hanley.
And some of that information I had not heard before, so I'm glad you had that. Yeah, I did read. We were talking about his pool business, pool hall business. That when he first started, his mother had to sign for his license because he was underage, and that he did go in with somebody later to form a shoe store business called Blue Front Shoe Shop. And I also had read that his father had worked as a handyman for Joseph Irwin, and then his father went to work for Joseph Irwin on the interurban line, and that he stayed with that until he passed away. But so, lots of interaction, I think, between families here in Columbus, and some that we've talked about in the past even. And as you said, Granville Lee being a cousin to Wayne Hanley, their mothers were sisters. Talking about Wayne Hanley and his daughter sort of leads us into Benjamin Mickey King. Yeah.
Benjamin was Ann King's husband. So there's that connection again to the Lee family. Benjamin was stationed at Camp Atterbury. That's how he came to Columbus. He was part of the Army military police service. And he met in Indianapolis. I guess Ann and a few girls had decided they were going to Indianapolis to have some fun at one of the clubs up there. And they loved to dance. So he asked her to dance. And he didn't actually ask for her home address or her telephone or anything like that. He got her license plate number and tracked her down here in Columbus.
Pretty ingenious.
They married and moved to Lafayette, and he enrolled at Purdue University. And after he graduated, they moved back to Columbus. They lived in a home that was owned by Olive Murphy between the years of 1964 to 1968. Olive introduced him to Dr. David Adler, and Benjamin was eventually hired by the hospital through that connection. He was on the staff as a microbiologist in 1958. He actually grew up in New Jersey and South Carolina. He played track at Purdue, which allowed him to get his education paid for. While he was in Columbus, he developed a tutoring program for students that were interested in going on to college. Because at that time, there had not been any black students who went to college after they graduated from high school here in Columbus. There were scholarships that were developed. After they moved, they were planning on moving out of Olive's house and buying a home of their own. And they found that it was very difficult to buy a home here in Columbus. And there were provisions in deeds and land rights and things that stated that blacks could not own homes. I think it was past 25th Street or 22nd Street, around in that area.
And what year was this?
This was back in 1968. You know, being connected to the hospital and knew various persons who worked there and that were in higher positions than he, they connected him up with Dr. William R. Laws. And from there, they formed a commission through the mayor's office to open that area up to anyone who wanted to buy a home. So they did buy a home out there, and Ann still lives in that same house that they purchased. He was instrumental in opening up housing. They formed the William R. Laws Foundation, which allowed numerous black kids here in Columbus to attend college. And my husband, Dennis Roberts, was the first or one of the first to attend college here through grants from the William R. Laws Foundation, although he did have a scholarship, a football scholarship, but the monies from the Laws Foundation also helped him to further his education. Benjamin had 2 kids with Ann, Valerie and Ron. Ron still lives here in Columbus, and Valerie lives in Atlanta. So, and Ron has a son who is in the Naval Academy in, I guess it's Virginia, out of, close to Washington, D.C. area. So they are a fledgling family here in town and love the area, and Ann has remained here most of her life, other than being in Lafayette when her husband was going to school.
I love the story you tell about how they met and everything, because I found, I could find some of the facts about it, but I didn't have the story. So I like hearing the story about how they came together and and about their life when they lived in Lafayette and all. You mentioned the William Laws Foundation. That's still active, right?
No, it is not
anymore?
active anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been too long, has it?
It hasn't been too long, because
Okay.
At one time I was president of the William R. Laws Foundation, and it moved on to other hands, and then eventually the foundation actually ceased, but we had formed through the Heritage Foundation a scholarship, ongoing scholarship funds through them to offer to kids who wanted to further their education. So that piece is still ongoing.
And William R. Laws was the minister at the Presbyterian Church
That's correct.
at the time that it was formed, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
I just wanted to clarify some
Yes,
of that.
that is true.
And speaking about Benjamin Mickey King, when he passed away very early in his life. He was out in Tucson, Arizona at a convention of some type.
Mhm.
And I think it was, I thought I wrote it down here, but maybe I didn't. But I believe he had an aneurysm,
Mhm.
maybe,
Yes.
and passed away from that in December 4th of 1974. So, that's been, I won't add it up here, but, it's been many years, and he still has left a legacy of many, many things, opening up the housing. He served on the Human Rights Commission here. He was part of the beginning of that, and so he's had a lasting impact here for his short life, really.
Yes, I think the housing piece of it was the door opener for Columbus, because there were just certain areas of town where blacks could live at that time, like on Jackson Street. All those houses have been erased. But on Union Street, there was a black neighborhood. Then you had Second Baptist was right in the middle of that neighborhood. But Second Baptist is still there, but you don't have it as a black neighborhood now. Probably aren't maybe one or two black families that live over in that area, and they have chosen where they want to live today.
It's kind of neat how those families, though, are connected too. I have one more that I want to share, and that's Clarence Washington King. Now, this Clarence King, there's more than one Clarence King, I'll just say. One Clarence King is a brother to Prentice Smith that we'll talk about at a later date. But this Clarence King, Clarence Washington King, is her brother. I found him through searching on newspapers.com, just some of the things that he was involved in, which I thought was kind of interesting. Now, when I looked up his birth date in the paper, there were about 3 different years that I saw. His stone says he was born in 1884. Find a Grave says 1882, but his World War I registration, his draft registration, says 1883, and his marriage record to his wife Ophelia, that also says 1883, which makes me think, those are dates he probably gave, so I'm kind of leaning toward the 1883. But anyway, it doesn't really matter exactly the year, I suppose. Gives you the general idea. Early 1880s is when he was born. But he died July 18th, 1930 in Edinburgh. Now, Clarence, in his younger part of his life, when he became a young man, he had moved to New York City, and he was a chauffeur there. And the story that the newspaper records is that he was said to have been the originator of the stop-and-go crossing signals that allowed pedestrians to cross the street, that he had that idea, and he shared it with the New York City police chief. And nothing came of it for a while, but then later on, all of a sudden, everybody had these crosswalk signs, but he was never given credit for having thought of the idea. So that's what was recorded in the newspaper. So I thought that was kind of interesting. If you see those, think of Clarence. And then at some point he moved back to the Columbus area, and then I think he had a shoe shine parlor, and then at some point he moved up to the Edinburgh area, and he opened a dry cleaning business there. And in the obituary, it talks about how Clarence was, everybody in town loved him. He owned this shop, and he would go, there was a swimming hole evidently, and I was trying to figure out where it is, but I haven't found it yet. So anyway, there was a community swimming area, and he and his friends would go there quite frequently to swim in the summer months because it was so hot. And so they were there all the time, I guess, because there was one place in the paper that said on the day that he went to, the last day he went to this swimming hole, his wife said, don't bring the car home with with the seats all wet again. And I thought, that sounds like something I would say to my husband. So anyway, he went to the swimming hole, and evidently, he dove in several times, he and his friends, but evidently the last time he dove in, they think he had a heart attack. It was so hot, and they'd been in and out of the water and all, and so they think he had a heart attack. And so he actually passed away in July 18th of 1930, and the Edinburgh Courier described him being well liked by everyone for his genial disposition and his fine characteristics. He was a man of noble character. He possessed a pleasing personality and was indeed a gentleman. And also, he was a great supporter of the athletic department in Edinburgh. Said he attended all the games. He loved basketball, and if he wasn't going to be there, he'd write him a little note of encouragement. I thought that was sweet. And he belonged to several fraternal organizations, and then he had a singing group. They were called the Four Harmony Kings. He was part of that singing group. He was a tenor singer, and they sang in a lot of special functions in or around Columbus and Edinburgh, and they even sang some, I guess, up in Indianapolis. So they must have been pretty good. And from everything I've read, it sounds like they were very good. He was part of as I said, he was part of the King family. That Prentice Smith, is her brother. And of course, they still have descendants living in this area. He had married Ophelia Robinson, December 29th of 1924. I thought Clarence should be remembered. He's buried in City Cemetery here in Columbus. And I think I read that he might have been a member of the Second Baptist Church because his family, was part of that. And
Possible.
so, but some of the other members, I didn't look up all of these people, but part of the group that sang with him, there was Will Johnson, Jack, I don't know if it's Imes, I-M-E-S, and John Stewart. They were the other members of his group. But
Yes, I recognize those names. He
Do you?
possibly was a member of Second Baptist because those people were members.
Okay. But I thought his story was just so amazing, and again, just a short life, but such an impact in the things he did, and just seems like everybody liked him so well. And there was another story that said when he would go swimming, he was almost like a lifeguard there. He would watch out for the children. He had special interest in the children and wanted to watch out for them, and was just well liked by everybody. And his wife, the last I have found about her, at some point she moved to Peoria, Illinois. Looks like in January of 1933, so he died in 1930 in Peoria. She married someone named Frank Hayden, and I think they would come back here occasionally and visit, but that's all I could find about her after his death. But I just thought Clarence Washington King was just an interesting person that I wanted to remember. So I don't know if you have
I
any-
did not have any information about him. Didn't know that he existed,
Yeah.
honestly, because
Really?
when you mentioned Clarence King, I automatically thought of Prentice's son.
Right,
So that's interesting. Thank
right,
you for
and I
sharing
don't
that.
know much about that Clarence, but I know that it in this Clarence's obituary it does mention that he had a nephew, Clarence King. So he may have been the only child she had at that point.
Possibly, because she did have several kids. I can't remember all of their names, but there's a daughter that lives in her home, and of course Alan, who lives out in the country. I'm not sure exactly what street it is, but and then they have several grandkids that live in Columbus. You have Alan Jr. and Mary Esther, and let's see, what's the other girl's name? Can't remember her name. Bianca. They all live here in town.
Well, those are the people that we had chosen to speak about this time. And as Kate said, we want to continue to include people in future tours because, as she mentioned, Black history is Bartholomew County history. It's American history. And we want to make sure that we cover all of our history. So we thank Paulette for being a part of our tour, and I really enjoyed talking to you.
Well, I enjoyed learning about some people that I knew a little bit about, but not enough. So thank you for
Well, and when
doing
I
a lot of
started,
research and coming up with, especially about the rooster.
well, when I started, I knew nothing about any of these people. So this has been educational for me, and I have enjoyed learning about these people.
Yes.
Special people. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.